the journalist who exposed a CIA-linked cocaine pipeline and paid for it with his career and his life.
The new feature film, Kill the Messenger, opens around the country this week.
To talk more about Gary Webb,
A Pulitzer-winning reporter uncovered explosive CIA connections to drugs. Then the media machine turned against him completely. Now, before any headlines, before the investigations, before the firestorm, you've got to understand the battlefield. Late 1970s. Central America is boiling. In Nicaragua, dictator Anastasio Somoza is finally overthrown. After years of iron-fisted rule, he's pushed out, and into that power vacuum steps a new force, the Sandinistas. They weren't just another political party. They were revolutionaries. And leading them, Daniel Ortega. Ortega called himself a socialist. Washington called him something else, a communist aligned with the Soviet Union and Cuba. And in the middle of the Cold War, that label wasn't small. It was explosive. This was peak Cold War paranoia. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a global chess match. Every country mattered. Every power shift felt like a domino tipping over. Washington pushed the domino theory, the belief that if one Central American country fell to communism, others would follow, eventually threatening the U.S. When Nicaragua shifted politically, President Ronald Reagan saw it as a serious risk. A fierce anti-communist, he believed communism had to be stopped everywhere. The U.S. began supporting the Contra rebels, right-wing fighters trying to overthrow the Sandinista government. Reagan called them freedom fighters, but critics condemned their actions. Congress then passed the Boland Amendment, banning U.S. military aid to the Contras. Legally, that should have ended involvement, but it didn't. Convinced the fight against communism couldn't stop, officials turned to covert operations behind the scenes. But wait, this is where it gets even stranger. Enter Oliver North, a Marine lieutenant colonel working at the National Security Council, clean-cut, loyal, deeply anti-communist, and willing to take risks. North and others began crafting a workaround. If Congress wouldn't fund the Contras, they'd find money somewhere else. The plan? Sell weapons to Iran. Yes, Iran. At the time, one of America's biggest enemies. Iran would pay cash. That cash wouldn't go through normal U.S. channels. Instead, it would be routed through Saudi arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi. Khashoggi moves the money into foreign banks, including accounts in Cyprus. From there, funds are redirected to purchase weapons. Those weapons, quietly shipped to the Contras. The CIA coordinates the logistics. Planes, transfers, no public records, no clear paper trail, off the books, kept hidden from Congress, the FBI, and even parts of the Pentagon. The operation ran through a shadow network of money, weapons, and foreign banks. Its driving belief was simple: stopping communism justified the risk. But when governments operate in secrecy, control becomes unclear. Soon, the conflict escalated. The U.S. mined Nicaragua's harbors while brutal fighting spread across jungles through ambushes and raids. The Contra rebels, divided into northern and southern factions, remained united against the Sandinistas. Behind the scenes, the CIA advised and coordinated operations. The DEA was present too, but their anti-drug mission wasn't the priority, because if drug routes funded anti-communist efforts, stopping them wasn't urgent. And then something started happening back home. Mid-1980s, cocaine floods the United States, not a trickle, a surge. Shipments that were supposed to be moving through Central America began finding their way north, through Nicaragua, into California, and once it hit Los Angeles, everything changed. Around 1984, crack cocaine exploded onto the scene. Cheap, potent, fast-moving. It spread like wildfire through neighborhoods that were already struggling. Within months, entire communities were being ripped apart. Crime spiked, addiction skyrocketed, families collapsed under the weight of it. Nobody had seen anything hit this hard, this fast, and people started asking the obvious question: how does something like this just appear overnight? Whispers began connecting dots. The Contras, the war, the covert money pipeline. Was cocaine being moved to fund the fight in Nicaragua? Was drug money quietly fueling a foreign conflict? It sounded unbelievable. But sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones no one wants to look at too closely. And that's exactly where this story is heading next. And this is where one reporter decides to pull on a thread nobody else wanted to touch. Gary Webb wasn't some blogger chasing clicks. He was a serious investigative journalist, a Pulitzer Prize winner, methodical, old school, the kind of reporter who lived in court documents and flight manifests. At the time, he was working for the San Jose Mercury News, and while most coverage treated the crack epidemic like a street-level crime story, Webb started asking a bigger question. Where did it actually begin? So he went straight to the source. He traveled to Nicaragua, sat down with Contra leaders, fighters, people in the middle of the war. Then he spoke with Sandinista officials who flat out claimed the drugs weren't their operation. They pointed back at the Contras. One name kept surfacing: Oscar Blandon, a key figure tied to the cocaine movement. Then Webb traced connections to major Los Angeles distributors. Slowly, carefully, he connected the profits from cocaine sales back to Contra networks and uncovered signs that the CIA knew more than it admitted. This wasn't guesswork, it was legwork, and then he published. In 1996, the Mercury News published a 7-part investigative series called Dark Alliance. Journalist Gary Webb reported that networks linked to the Contras played a role in fueling the crack cocaine epidemic in Los Angeles. His claim wasn't that the CIA created the drug trade, but that the agency allowed it to happen and looked the other way when drug trafficking supported anti-communist operations. Webb also alleged that investigations were obstructed when they got too close to those networks. The reaction was immediate. Communities devastated by crack demanded answers. Protests and public meetings followed, as many began questioning whether the war on drugs had been presented very differently from reality. And here's where the story flips completely. Instead of investigations into the CIA, the investigation turned on Gary Webb. The Los Angeles Times assigned 17 reporters, 17, to dissect and dismantle his work, not to expand it, not to follow the leads, to tear it apart. They zeroed in on minor timeline discrepancies, debated exactly when crack first appeared in Los Angeles, argued over origin details that weren't even the core accusation. The central claim that Contra-linked networks moved cocaine and the CIA knew got buried under technical nitpicking. Then came the heavyweights. The Washington Post ran a front-page rebuttal. Reporter Walter Pincus strongly defended the CIA's position. Soon after, the New York Times joined in. The narrative shifted fast. Webb wasn't a serious reporter anymore. He was labeled a conspiracy theorist. Some claimed he fabricated parts of the story entirely. Pressure mounted on the Mercury News. Webb was sent back to Nicaragua multiple times to recheck everything. His editors initially stood by him, publicly, but the drumbeat didn't stop. Eventually, the paper stepped back, quietly distanced itself, and what felt like separate criticisms began looking like a coordinated national takedown. Webb was suddenly alone. And once the headlines turned against him, the fall was brutal. Gary Webb was forced to resign, and his reputation collapsed almost overnight. Freelancing failed, opportunities disappeared, and he moved to Denver, hoping for a fresh start. Instead, isolation and depression took hold. Once celebrated, he was now sidelined. He was later found dead in a motel room from a shotgun wound, ruled a suicide. His family accepted it, but questions lingered. Some blamed pressure and humiliation. Others suspected darker forces, though nothing was proven. Later investigations revealed the CIA had ties to drug-linked figures and failed to report key information, validating the core of Webb's claims. But here's the part that stings. No prosecutions, no major firings, no real accountability. The confirmation came, but it came quietly. Years later, something else happened. Retired reporters from the Los Angeles Times publicly admitted their role in dismantling Webb's reputation. Some expressed regret. They acknowledged there had been an effort to discredit him. The Dark Alliance series was reevaluated. Slowly, historians and journalists began recognizing that Webb hadn't fabricated his story. That sparked a bigger debate about media collusion, about institutional protection, about whether major outlets defended power instead of questioning it. And for many people, trust in those institutions never fully recovered. He exposed a system that powerful institutions didn't want questioned. Years later, investigations confirmed the heart of his story, but the damage was done. Gary Webb lost everything chasing the truth. So here's the question. When power protects itself, who protects the truth?